G'day legends, g'day superstars, Peps here, and I'm here to take you through a massive round 6. It's the Easter weekend. Happy Easter to you and your families, and it was an absolute cracker-dacker of a weekend of football. I hope you had a great weekend with your families. More importantly, had a great Easter weekend, just enjoying time, embracing what singly is the greatest sport in the world. Everybody joining me on YouTube, everybody joining me on Facebook, everybody listening to me on our favorite podcast channels. I am Chris Pepper, and you'll probably notice that there's only one voice on the cast tonight, and it's simply because the great man, Jamie the Jdog Wallace, has, just like a number of teams so far this year, have already taken his bye and is headed off for a well-rested break with his family for the next couple of weeks. So you're going with me, Han Solo, the original, but together we are the best, host of Lace Out. And I can only say that this weekend, the Easter weekend of football, you've got to remember, it started all the way back on Thursday, was probably one of the best weekends of football that I have watched for a long time. It's awesome when you can actually sit down and just watch games of football. You get to go to see your own team. You get to go and see a number of other teams playing as well. But when you sit back and just enjoy good teams playing against each other, and also bad teams having some shockers, you're going to get some pretty big stories to come out of this weekend. And when you have a look at over the results, we'll get into them very shortly. We'll have a look at the results. We'll have obviously look at some key facts and figures from each of the games as well too. But I'm actually really keen to bring up a point, and it is about a guy that came back this week, Marcus Bontempelli, versus arguably the best player in the league, Nick Dacos. And I'm just going to press it out there, just a little teaser, is who is the best player in the league out of those two right this minute? Because the Bont's been back 1 week, Dacos has been playing for a number, has been lighting it up all season. But on the weekend, we got a bit of a reminder that the great man is back. But we'll cover that off very shortly. Got some bags, got some few other bits and pieces to get through, but everybody is on the chat. Mossy's obviously back. He's saying that Bont is back, and by Jingo, by crikey, big fella, he was back in a massive way. I am joined by the great man, Kenny Rogers, tonight. So, Kenny, he is the gambling man, my friends, and yeah, lots to get into it. All right, let's take it like we normally do. And the first thing we want to have a look at is the ladder for, after a huge round 6, the Easter weekend of footy. And there were upsets. There were teams that I picked had no chance whatsoever, have come out and either destroyed teams, played out of their skins, or totally stunned the weekend of football. And then what a massive game we finished on today, being the Easter Monday Spectacular, which was just simply Hawthorn versus Geelong. That was a finals-like game, but we'll cover that very shortly. That's Jarvis, Khan the pair. Good to see you on the chat, my friend. But Collingwood and Brisbane Lions both played each other on that beautiful Thursday night many days ago, where Collingwood got the chocolates, and they just didn't get the chocolates. They stole the whole chocolatier store. Haig's Chocolates is now, once again, being stolen by a Collingwood football team. They decimated the Brisbane Lions on Thursday night. And I will say this, I've been stuck into this guy a hell of a lot over the last number of years. I've called him a little bit overrated. I've called him a bloke who still has not taken a contested mark in his entire career at the Collingwood Football Club. I would say he's not playing in his father's shadow, but his brother doesn't get as much love, who I think is even as good as him. But Nick Dacos against the Brisbane Lions showed that you can't keep a good man down for a full 100 minutes of football, because his second half was extraordinary what he delivered. And it made me sit back and think that, you know what, I have been a bit harsh on him. I do think he gets a little bit too much in a contested ball, but you know why he gets it. It's simply because he gets from one contest, hard running to the next, hard running to the next, hard running to the next. And he makes opportunities not just for himself, but he frees up his teammates and gets his teammates into great spots around the field as well too. And I got to sit back and watch him in all his flight against the all-star lineup of the Brisbane Lions midfield, and he tore them apart. It was everything from his 84% being on ground, his 21 kicks, his 17 handballs, going at 76% efficiency rating. They just couldn't stop him. And it just goes to show that it's great to have a tagger, but you have to have a tagger that's able to go with someone for the entire game. And no one was able to go with him for that. And it just goes to show that when he's firing, they are the oldest team going around, but they're the most structured. Are they premiership favourites at the moment? I think a lot of teams would say yes. I would say a lot of supporters and a lot of media pundits would say yes. But once again, I actually haven't picked them to finish in the 8, and a lot of people know that. But the thing about them is simply this. When it comes to Collingwood, we've still got a lot of time and a lot of cold months coming ahead, and those older bodies are going to start to feel it. So I'm just keeping my powder dry at the moment. But Nick Dacos, my goodness, he was absolutely stunning. I could have picked another 10 players out of that team who were just as awesome as well too. So Brisbane, they got their first loss for the season. They're going to sit back. They're going to lick their wounds. That wasn't a very Brisbane-like type of performance, and we're expecting a lot better of them. Gold Coast had a loss on the weekend. Their first loss against Richmond. Like, who would have picked that? Let's be honest. Who would have picked Richmond to beat Gold Coast? But it's just Gold Coast, once again, not being able to win away and also not being able to win at Marvel. So we probably should have seen this one coming. Dimmer doesn't even like going down there when he's the opposition coach. So they'll go back. They'll reassess what happened. I think they're just going to think it was going to turn up and win it. And they didn't when we saw what happened. GWS, they had a loss. So isn't it interesting that out of the top 4 teams, 3 of them had a loss over the weekend. They went down to a really tight, ugly, hardcore, brutal style game against Adelaide Crows on the Adelaide Crows deck. And that was the only reason why I was going to pick Adelaide, because it was being played there. Hawthorn, Geelong, they beat Hawthorn in an absolute classic, and we'll get into that a little bit more today. The Western Bulldogs, they got their win against St Kilda. That was probably, I think, a few people expected a closer contest. But it just goes to show that the Doggies have been playing awesome football for a lot of the year, and then they serve up what they did last night. And they had this guy called Marcus Bontempelli come back, and just when you think he's out of sight, out of mind, the great man came back and showed why he is arguably their best player in the league. Fremantle lost to the D's. I was absolutely gunning at that game. Melbourne, I know Tori Williams, she's a massive Melbourne supporter, sponsor. We were chatting before the game, and we were scared of what was going to be served up. My kids didn't even want to come to the game on Saturday, because they didn't want to see their team lose again. But within the first 5 minutes of that game, you knew something was completely different. They were handballing more. They were moving the ball. They switched the ball. And that's something that Simon Goodwin's teams just don't do. And they were really showing it up to Fremantle. And those first 2 quarters where they kicked 6 goals in each were us sitting back going, where has this been all year? We saw it after the first game against GWS, but where's it been for the past 4? And I think dropping Fritsch and dropping Van Rooyen made a lot of difference to, putting a spark into the team, playing a lot of the youth, and it's starting to show as well too. So it was just a lot better effect. We'll get into a lot bit more. Port Adelaide, another great win on the weekend as well too. Essendon, poor. St Kilda, very poor. Carlton, soft kill against North. Sydney Swans, once again, very, very disappointing. Are you worried about the Swan supporters? I'd love to hear what you're thinking. What's going wrong? It can't all be injury-based, because you have still got a lot of talent on the park, and you did kick 5 goals in the last quarter, but something's definitely not right there. Richmond, massive surprise win over the Gold Coast Suns, and they were sensational. Tim Taranto, what a game. Noah Bolter, should he have played? I'm not too sure, but after what happened at the Sydney game on the weekend, which we'll get into very shortly, he should have been playing when it comes down to it. North Melbourne, poor as. Melbourne, sensational. Did not see it coming. Great win by the boys. And then you got West Coast Eagles, who really put it up towards Essendon at the Wacker. And I was absolutely shocked that they threw that one away. They had them on toast, and they should have taken that win, and Essendon did get another win. So I'll take that back, Essendon supporters. I did get that wrong. So the ladder, very, very interesting. I thought the 8 was worked out a couple of weeks ago, but just goes to show that when you've got, in that top 8, half the teams lost to lower teams on the ladder this weekend. When you think it's over, it's definitely not over. Alrighty. So Let's go and have a little look at some of the results from the weekend. Really high-level stuff. Brisbane, they got smashed by Collingwood on that Thursday night, and I've gone into it, but Nick Dacos, an absolute gun, and I'm probably just appreciating him a little bit more. I thought Josh was, if not as good in that first half as well too, but Brisbane were just poor across the board. Their execution, they could not stop the handball of Collingwood, and their structures, because they're being an older team, they've played with each other for quite a long time, and they just know what each other is going to do, and they're very systems-based, and it showed that they knew what they had to do. They had to take it through the defenses of Brisbane, just run and handball all the way through, and they absolutely decimated them. So I think Brisbane are going to rue after the fact that they probably would have penciled this one in, and they've had a lot of, I'd say, easier games so far this year, but that one against Collingwood will make them show, look, we aren't there yet, and it also gave me the first opportunity to look at Brisbane playing a really gun team without Joe Danaher, where I've looked at how is it going to leave a big hole, and it's left a massive hole. So they've got some work to do. I'm not too sure who's going to be their massive key target. I don't rely on Hipwood. It's not going to happen because he's just not the brute that Danaher was. So Collingwood have got a stack of them. Brisbane are running a little bit thin, so they're going to have to get a little bit creative moving in the next couple of weeks. Carlton versus North Melbourne. I don't know what you can say about this, but George Hewitt, George just did what George just does, and he was just magnificent to watch. And it was probably the soft kill that Carlton were hoping for. When Zach Williams is able to kick a massive handful, when Curnow can kick a handful, you know that there's something not right there. And they were really disappointing, the Kangaroos. I actually tipped them, I think, to take this one out. But where does this put North Melbourne after the way they just pulled Melbourne apart? They've done nothing since then. It's literally, if you get the ball past their half back line, you might as well just run it straight back to the middle of the ground because it's over. It's going to be a score. And Carlton can go, hey, you know what? It's a win. We got the 4 points. Let's move on to next week. North Melbourne have a lot of soul searching to do. They've signed up a lot of players on a lot of money over a lot of years, and their senior players are letting down the kids, and some players are there who have come over on big money and not delivering the goods. You know, I could be looking at Griffin Logue for an example, Aiden Core. They're not showing what they should be showing, what they've done at previous clubs as well too. So North Melbourne, I don't believe all the ruckus when it comes to Clarkson, but I do believe that there is something seriously wrong with their defensive makeup, because they were just letting Carlton walk through their defences. It just wasn't organised, and it looks like, you know, when kids drop a bag of Lego on the floor and it just scatters everywhere. That's what their backline looked like. That's what their defensive measures around stoppages looked like, and Carlton were just way too good. West Coast versus Essendon. I got to sit down and watch this game on Good Friday, and West Coast, you had this one in the bag, and I don't know whether it was just a lack of winning over the seasons, a lack of composure, or you just could not believe how good of a position that you were in, but you had that one. And you let Essendon back in, and due to the big Peter Wright kicking one of these. Bags, we love it when they kick 'em. Bags, it's gotta be 6 or more. Bags, we love it when they kick 'em. Ooh! All right, Petey Wright. We loves a bit of bags, because a bags is a 6, and he kicked an absolute corker 6. And some of his kicks from 50 and beyond were just sublime. And, you know, players that kick around the corner, and players that, you know, try the check side or try the reverse. I don't think there's anything sexier in football than a long bomb 50 drop punt that just goes straight through the high diddle. There is nothing more that gets me aroused other than a Clayton Oliver out of the centre square bang, bang, bang style in the 2021 grand final. But they were absolutely magnificent, Essendon, to come back from where they were. And West Coast, like I said, they just let that one slip when they shouldn't have. And it was just disappointing, because it would have got them their first win. It would have got them a little bit of belief, because I think that's what they're looking for, and just to show that McWalter is on the right path. But they can take a lot of what they did out of that. which is really cool. So hopefully West Coast, they don't get too excited the week after next when they play my boys, the D's, but hopefully this week they'll be able to take some of those good elements and build on those for the week coming up. Melbourne Fremantle, I was at this game. Three things that I took out of it. Shai Bolton, magnificent selection for Fremantle to target him as well. Andrew Brayshaw, just like I've been used to watching Gus Brayshaw, get to see his brother play live. He was absolutely immense. But like I said, Shai Bolton was literally keeping them in it. Those two were the only two keeping them in the game. But on the flip side, Jack Viney played a tagging role for the first time. I don't think I've ever seen him do that. And he was just magnificent in the way that he stuck to Sarong, helping him to virtually nothing, and was still be able to get his own ball. You've got to remember, he also had 25 of his own and kicked a goal and had close to 500 metres in distance as well. So he got a lot of it and also held probably their most prolific ball winner to a measly return for the weekend. And, you know, I love this guy. Unfortunately, he's broken with my list behind. Because he Pickett, if you haven't had a chance to watch some of the highlights, and it wasn't just his running and marking, but it was the way that he was bringing players in. I love the way that they had him come out of the middle, but then after that centre square moved into a stoppage or whatever, he just went down to the forward and played power forward. And if you have Cozzy Pickett running around in that forward line, I'd hate to be a backman and I'd hate to be a midfielder at a centre square bounce because they just got the mix right. They held six forwards back, something that they don't do. They've had an extra one up at the stoppages, which has allowed, unfortunately, for opposition teams to have that outnumber at the out back, and they didn't do that this weekend. They used chains of handballs. There were times that they thought they were going to do the dump kick, and they never did. So it was really, really good to see them doing something a little bit different than they normally have done. And that's the way we want to see Melbourne. Dropping Van Rooyen, dropping Fritsch had been on the cards for a while. I don't blame Van Rooyen altogether. I think the way the ball was being delivered to him was absolutely shithouse over the last number of months. But it just goes to show that if you can throw a rocket up a team's ass, anyone can break the stratosphere. And they did that. And they should be really proud. They're going to go into Richmond on Anzac Eve. I'll be at the game with the kids. Can't wait to take them to it, to see the spectacle of it. But you've got a Richmond team who are up and about. And you've also got a Melbourne team who are up and about, which is exactly what we want moving into the next number of weeks. Adelaide versus GWS, really low scoring affair. Only thing you can take out of that is Adelaide, they are the real deal. They were the reason I did pick them on the weekend because it was being played at Adelaide. Fogarty going down is going to cause a bit of an issue, but that just means that Phil Thorpe and Walker's just going to have to push a little bit harder as well too. But they're going to get Rochelle back in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. So just having another smaller presence down at his feet is going to be even better. They've got their midfield humming along nicely. You had Tom Green. He did put in a massive effort, I will say, against Adelaide as well. He tried his absolute guts out, but, you know, with no Jesse Hogan, they struggle to score. Stringer hasn't performed as well as people would have thought. Now, it's going to take a couple of weeks for him to get into the swing of things, but he just hasn't hit those expectations that I thought he would. But Adelaide cannot fault anything about them. They were just absolutely brilliant through the whole thing, and there wasn't someone who really stood out for them. But what it did go to show that overall team performance, gorgeous. We spoke about Richmond. We've spoken about the Gold Coast already. Richmond, Nick Vlosten, what a game. If you get a chance, if you're a young kid who likes to play in the back line, do yourself a favour. And if you can get onto the KO highlights and just watch Nick Vlosten working down back, it was gorgeous. Just cutting everything off. Ben King didn't get a chance. Jed Walter didn't get a chance. They just repelled everything. And Tim Taranto, you could probably say he played his best game for the club in quite a long time. He made Matt Rowell, Anderson, Tuke Miller through the middle of the ground look pretty average. And once again, you get someone who I've been picking on quite a number of years as well too, in the terms of, the wanker down a full forward for Richmond. Played in a few flags. I've forgotten his name at the top of my head, but he just comes out and puts on the big boy pants and has a bit of a presence down there, and you know, makes it easy for the small forwards to crumb around at his feet as well too. So It was really good from a Richmond perspective. It was really good from a club perspective. Tom Lynch, sorry, to make an impact for them as well too. And I think there's a lot to take out of that. Richmond, they play with a bit of mongrel as well too. So I think it's funny, isn't their rebuild going? You'd almost say a lot better than people thought, and they've probably overtaken West Coast already. I know that they did the dump. They've taken over West Coast already. I don't think they're at North level just yet, but their performances are a lot better than them as well. All right. Sydney, Port Adelaide. Sydney really disappointing again. The margarine man, Zach Butters, he just spreads them thin, doesn't he? He is... I don't think there's a team in the AFL that so far this year I've seen when a player comes in and dominates, and when he's not there, the team pretty much capitulates. And I'm definitely talking about Zach Butters. He was just immense on Sunday. I know that they came back in the long run. Why do they leave Francis on the bench for so long? Like he's better than Tom McCartan down forward, and he showed it in that last quarter. The game was pretty much done and dusted by then, but at least he had a bit of a crack. But yeah, there's a lot of worrying signs about Sydney. I just don't rate them. When Brodie Grundy was their highest rated player over the weekend, Heaney hasn't hit where he was last year. Nick Blakey, they're just doing things that are a little bit selfish that I haven't seen Sydney do in a long time. I don't know whether it's a new coaching philosophy, where it's sometimes trying a little bit too hard, but they're just not clicking like I'd expect them to be clicking, coming from what they've done under Horse Longmire. So this is a wait and see scenario. Western Bulldogs versus St Kilda. I thought this one would be a lot tighter, but the highest rated player for the weekend, Marcus Bontempelli, hasn't played all season, comes back and just tears them a new one. Where do you want to go? The 30 disposals. Was it the 86.7 efficiency in his disposals? Was it the 442 metres gained? Was it his 9 ground ball gets, 12 contested possessions, his 2 goals? Was it his 1 intercept? I don't know what it was, but he is just a freak of nature. And that's why I want to have this discussion with you both on the podcast, on the chat, etc. If you had to put these two players up against a wall as the number 1 player in the league right now, who would it be? Well, we'll get into it in a moment, but I want you just to have a bit of a think. Dacos, Nick Dacos, or the Bont, who would you take? Because I'm fascinated to hear how this one goes. And St Kilda, very, very disappointing. Matt Kennedy, I don't know why the Blues got rid of him. Blues have done this twice, haven't they? They got rid of Owies, and he's been showing something over there in WA. And they get rid of Matt Kennedy, and he was the third highest rated player over the weekend. He was sensational, and he was another one of those reasons. With him, Ed Richards, just loved Bailey Williams. Like they had, out of the top 20 players in the league, they had 5 sitting in the top 5 rated players for the weekend. Libba, Bailey Williams, Ed Richards, Matt Kennedy, and top 1, Marcus Bontempelli. So St Kilda, bit of a reality check. There was a lot of ball going into that back end. That's why Callum Wilkie was their highest rated player for the weekend. But yeah, a lot of soul searching to do with that one. And when you think you haven't had a great weekend, you've had a great weekend of footy, you then get to finish up with arguably, I reckon, the game. Is it the game of the year already? Is it the game of the year? Because it bloody well felt like that one, which was Hawthorn, Geelong. It's been going since 2010. It's been going as the Easter Monday clash. There's been so many good ones over the years, but this one was an absolute belter because Geelong got off to a flyer. Hawthorn get their way back. And then there's a guy that I've picked on quite a fair bit. I've called him soft. I've called him not that impactful. I've called him, he doesn't perform in big games. But Bailey Smith was an absolute freak today. His running capacity from contest to contest was really the thing that just drove Geelong across the MCG throughout the entire day. You got Danger doing his things down the middle, and every team, both teams were doing the same thing. They were kicking great goals. They were missing, easy shots, easy turnovers. It was just, it felt like a finals game in late April. And that is the type of footy that we all sit back and go, we want more of that. That's what we want to chew on. That's the stuff that we want to. There were scores being kicked. It wasn't, a 50 to 60 type of game. It was higher than that. It was 79 to 86. So we're talking, 23 goals being kicked between both teams, scoring going back and forth, match-saving tackles. It was just awesome to see. And then you have Carl Amon in the back end of the quarter. I think he had 12 plus in the last quarter. He was the only thing keeping Hawthorn in there and just couldn't get them over the line. It was just a belter of a game, a belter of a spectacle to sit and watch. And when you're calling over to your wife to say, hun, come over here and watch these highlights for the last 3 minutes of the game because it'll rock your socks, just the pressure cooker atmosphere. And you got 80,000 football lovers at this game. It is no wonder why it is not just the number one sport in Victoria. It is not the number one sport in just Australia. It is the number one sport in the world because we can just absolutely tear it apart. We can sit there, love every moment of it. We can sit next to a Hawthorn supporter. We can give them shit all day. We can sit back to a Geelong supporter. We can give them shit all day. And then at the end of the day, sit back and look at each other and say, that was a bloody good game. And that was the perfect way to finish an awesome round 6, the Easter weekend of AFL football. Rightio. I want to bring this up. It's already had a couple coming through because, like I said, I watched Nick Dacos on Thursday night. And I was absolutely fascinated with the way that he played the game. He was just unbelievable. Just like I said, I've said it before, his running capacity. He's only played 76 games of football, and you've got to keep that in the back of your mind because sometimes we think that he's been around for a little bit longer. But his resume of achievements has been pretty much unsurpassed for what he's done in his career so far. He is just immense. When I flip that around and I look at on Sunday night, I saw Marcus Bontempelli come back after a calf layoff. You would have thought that he would have just eased his way back into it. But he's come out and not just shown the two teams that were running around, but the football world that I am the best player in the league. It made me think that if you're playing a schoolboy football right now, and you had to put both these boys up against a wall, and you're the captain, whether it's you, Jules Julio, whether it's a good man, whether it's cheesy Justin Calvert, whether it's Troy Peters, whether it's Ash Jarvis, Glenn Moss, anybody out there, Chrissy Pepper, Jamie the Jdog Wallace, my wife, Narelle. Who would we pick if it was the Bont or Nick Dacos? Who would you take as the best player in the league, in the AFL right now out of those two? Now, if there's a third name that I haven't mentioned that you think it might be, I'd love to hear it in the chat. I'd love to hear it in the YouTube comments below. I'd love for you to send me a message on the Facebook channel. Now, Mossy's already come out and said that it was Sam Darcy was the best player in the comp. Well, he's only played a few games and he's out for the rest. He's out for probably a good 8 weeks with his knee, all right? But I'm looking at these two from a consistency perspective because the Bont wasn't playing last week. So if you just have a look over their career, one's played 241 games, the other one's played 76, all right? So there's a big vastness in the number of games that they've played. And I can only go by, I'm not going by season averages because one's played 1 game and I think one's played 5. I'm not going by the same age. So I'm just going career averages because I think the way I want to put this is a statistical perspective, but I also have an eye perspective that if I was starting a team, who would I want to have as the player that I build a team on? All right. And it's also coming through on the chat loud and fast. I got Timos. Great to have you on here, buddy. He's going hard to go past Dakes. Tory Williams has gone the Bont. So we're getting a bit of a mixture at the moment. I'll like to see. Keep them coming through. I want to hear they are. So They average around about 29 to 24 disposals, and that's in front of Nick Dacos. So he does get the ball a little bit more. The Bont has kicked more goals on average. He averages a goal a game over his career, which is pretty exceptional for a midfielder. We don't see that happen a hell of a lot. You've got, I'm not going to worry about hitouts, inside 50s. The Bont gets more inside 50s, but there's only one more per game, so they're quite even there. Goal assists, it's 0.6 to 0.8 a game, so very similar. Frees, 1 a game. Contested possessions, the Bont does outrank from the contested possessions perspective, and we're only looking at 11 to 9. But from an uncontested, that's where Nick gets a bit more of it as well too. So there's a gap about 4, so 17 to 14 on average there. Effective disposals, so Nick Dacos is a lot more effective, so he's averaging pretty much 25% more effectiveness with his number of disposals that he has per game. His disposal efficiency is about 3 points more, so it's 72 to 69. From a Clanger's perspective, they're very similar. From the contested marks, the Bont takes, on average, around about 1 contested mark every 1.5 games. Nick Dacos has not taken a contested mark in his entire career. So, for me, if you're going to be a contested player, you have to sort of take a contested mark somehow. But, like I said, when having a look at him on Thursday night, It does surprise me that he hasn't taken at least 1 in 76 games, but the way that he plays isn't where he's a lot 1 out. So I can hear that. From a Clanger's perspective, very easy. Marks inside 50, you're going to get more because I think the Bont does drift down to the forward line more than Dacos, so that makes a lot more sense as well too. From a clearances perspective, the Bont has it 5 to 4 per game. From rebound 50s, Nick Dacos has a lot more rebound 50s, but you could also he did play a bit of time down that half-back role as well too, and they use him as very much a link-up man coming out of the back 50 as well too, so that's why he's got it there. Nick bounces it more, Bont spends more time on ground, and 1%ers, it's 2.5 1%ers to almost 1%er a game. So, I look at this, and I know who I would choose. I would choose the Bont because I love a goal-kicking midfielder. But they play 2 different ways. And this is where you have to sort of say, well, if I was choosing a guy that I wanted to have burst out of the middle, brutality, big marking around the ground, able to take a mark up forward, able to snag a goal, zag a goal up forward when we really need one, I'd go the Bont. But if I needed a player that was virtually untaggable, that would link up from contest to contest, he would run from forward pocket to back pocket throughout the entire day. He would gut run harder than anyone that I've seen in a while in the AFL, and he would bring his teammates into the contest in every single game and be super reliable like the Bont is. That's where I would go Nick Dacos. So I know you'd say both players are the best in the league, but I think I'd take the Bont because I'm a Bont guy. But I can see why the chat is saying Dacos. So Collingwood supporters are going to say, Dacos, of course you'd take Dacos. Doggy supporters say, doggies. But I can tell you now, both sets of supporters would go, oh, I'd probably have Dacos at number 2. Or I would have the Bont at number 2 because they are just so awesome at what they do. Troy Peters, Bont all day, has the size and skill to play anywhere. Bont also has the credits in the bank swinging forward. Until Nick Dacos shows going forward and kicking 3 and 4 in a game. But like I just said, Troy, I think they are 2 different plays in the way that they play. And I think they are the number 1. They are the best player for their overall position and what they need to do. So if you put somebody who plays similar to Nick Dacos in the Nick Dacos role, I don't think there's anybody who does it better. And if you try to put somebody who does the Bontempelli type role, where he dominates in the midfield and then goes down forward, you could probably say maybe Danger's been the preface to him. But outside of that, I can't think of anybody who has 6 weeks off due to a calf injury, comes back against a team that has been playing really good football on their home deck at Marvel Stadium and just obliterates the competition to be the number 1 rated player in the weekend, which was the Bont. If you have either of those 2 players in your team, you're not going to be a loser. And so It's just one of those things that it's always going to be who was better, Gary Ablett Senior, Gary Ablett Junior. Who was better, Voss or Judd? Okay, it's always going to be Dunstall versus Lockett. It's going to be there, time at every position, somewhere, somehow. That's why we love football, because we can take two players who are dominating. We can look at their statistical. I can look at my eye side of things and go, I love what he does. I can appreciate what he does, and that's why I love football. But I'm fascinated. I'm going with the Bont, with Nick Dacos, just a small, close second, but that's what I love in a footballer. But I tell you what, if you are either of these footballers and you love what they do, you've got to love AFL football for that too. So, hey, let me know in the chat below. Let me know in the chat right now who you think is your number one player. And more importantly, if there was somebody else, who would it be and why? All right. I want to get into the fixture for this week because we have got some cracking games. We've got the Anzac weekend, so another three-day weekend for us all. Melbourne versus Richmond on Anzac Eve is going to be an absolute corker. I will be there. If you can get a ticket to the game, it's almost a little bit like today's game. It's almost like Anzac Day. You may not like either of these two teams, but the spectacle of the lights being out, the last post, the Shrine of Remembrance, the Eternal Flame being carried around on horseback all the way around the boundary at the MCG in total silence is a sight to behold. So if you can get there, I know there might be still some tickets left, please do so. Collingwood and Essendon, we've got the Anzac Day game. It's their game. Don't take it away from them. They've earned the right. Absolutely love it. Fremantle versus Adelaide. Wow, this is going to be a corker because Fremantle need to strike back because I picked them, I think, to finish in the top four. And at the moment, they don't even look like a top 8 team. Can they play at home and can they play against the big boys? This is going to be a tough one against Adelaide. We played a corker last week against GWS, and they'll be priming themselves. If Adelaide beat Fremantle at Fremantle by a decent margin, they are going to be a top 4, and they are a chance for the flag. St Kilda versus Brisbane. Two teams who were very, very disappointing last weekend. I don't know who was worse. I've almost got a feeling to say St Kilda will win this one just because it's on the deck of Marvel Stadium, and I know St Kilda will like to play on the fastness of there. And Brisbane, without having a Danaher replacement, I think they're going to get caught out because Wilkie will take Hipwood and he will absolutely clean the floor with him. Port Adelaide versus North Melbourne. Forget about that one. Port Adelaide by 10 goals. That could be a hungy if Port Adelaide to do what they did against Hawthorn a couple of weeks ago. They've got the capacity to do it. And with Butters in there, who makes a massive difference to that team, they could do anything. And North, if they lose this one by a massive margin, the pitchforks are going to start to come out. I don't think they're going to be able to sack Clarkson, but the questions will start to really, really get asked. GWS versus Western Bulldogs. These two teams have punched the living suitcases out of each other. If you go back all the way to that 2016 preliminary final, one of the greatest games of football I think I've ever watched on TV, and sitting with people who don't love football, get a chance to watch that one, do so. But these two teams, the Bulldogs will be loving what they did last week. GWS, very similar to what Brisbane were like, very disappointing in their game against Adelaide. They'll be wanting to get a win back there. Gold Coast versus Sydney. You'd say that Gold Coast win this one because it is in Gold Coast. And Sydney, I think, are going backwards at the rate of knots, and this is going to be another game to show it. Carlton versus Geelong at the MCG. Geelong should win this one. Again, their second week at the MCG in a row. It doesn't happen all that often. And Carlton, they will be buoyant by playing back at the G, but I just think that Geelong are going to be way too strong for them. But interesting to sort of see how Carlton pull up from it. And then Hawthorn versus West Coast. It is the twilight spot. Hawthorn playing West Coast at the 4:40 p.m. at Marvel Stadium. I think this is the first time in a long time that I'm really not looking forward to the graveyard slot. Usually they've had pretty good games down there. But Hawthorn versus West Coast, Hawthorn should win this one quite easily and do it with a bit of a smile on their face as well too. Alrighty. Hey, Troy Peters, Zach Merritt would go all right in the Dacos role if he did at least 16, if he didn't have at least 16 passengers on his back each week. Fair point, Troy. He has, week in, week out, he he's another one that I've got to appreciate a lot more over the last season or two because, I think once you see a lot more players live and you actually look at the nuances of the game and what he does for that team, you can see why he's been a multiple All-Australian, and there's no reason why he couldn't be again this year because I reckon there's been a couple of games where he's dragged Essendon on his back across for victory, and he should be doing, like I said, week in, week out. There's no... I'd struggle to think what would happen to Essendon if he wasn't playing there at all. That is how good he is as well too. And Mossy, I'll take both of them when the Big V comes back. That is a reason why you want the Big V. Bont. Could you imagine the starting midfield of Bont, Dacos, Merritt, Gawn? Stop it. That's why I would love State of Origin to be as a preseason game. It would be amazing. Absolutely amazing. Or, my other idea, the previous year's All-Australian team versus a Victoria or versus a New South Wales or the Aboriginal All-Stars. I'd like to see that. But yeah, I'd love to see State of Origin come back as well too. Hey, I know we miss the Jdog. We miss his smile. I miss his companionship on the potty as well too. But also, he's a pretty good looking bloke as well. But hey, that's our show for tonight. Everybody who's joined in, thank you very, very much. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, I'll have my tips out this week on the YouTube channel. So make sure if you haven't liked, subscribed, please do me a favor. It would mean a lot to me, a lot to Jdog as well too. We want to pump those numbers up as well. We want to get to at least 500 in the next couple of weeks so then we can actually put some links into the videos that you can actually visit and get some stuff out of it as well too. But that'll be the show for tonight. First one I've done by myself for quite a long time, and it does feel a bit weird. But we got our way through it. And more importantly, I've got to do it with the people on the live roll as well too. So for everybody listening on our favourite podcast audio app, for everybody who's watching this live, thank you very much. It is a shorter show when you're doing it one by yourself. It is a bit faster when it is solo. Timos, good job, Mr. Pepper. Really appreciate it, buddy. Have a great weekend. I'm from Lace Out. It's how you want your footy, and that has been your Easter round review. I'll see you this time next week, solo again, while the great man's sunning it up. Me and Kenny will be back. And I hope your team wins this weekend. And for all of the people who have served our country over the years, we thank you very much for your service. Have a great weekend.